Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Wednesday, September 25th, and for today we have Tropical Storm Helen threatens the U.S. and Mexico. Going once, going twice. Alex Jones's Cameras, Mike's InfoWars show and vitamin site. A pygmy hippo is stealing hearts and biting zookeepers. Zelensky addresses the Security Council, calling for attention to stay on Ukraine. Strange cellmates in a Brooklyn jail, Sean Combs and Sam Bankman-Fried. Tropical Storm Helen threatens the U.S. and Mexico. Tropical storm and hurricane watches were issued for parts of the lower Florida Keys, western Cuba, and Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula Tuesday morning as forecast elevated potential Tropical Cyclone 9 to Tropical Storm Helen. Helen formed in the northwestern Caribbean Sea, just south of the western tip of Cuba, and is expected to reach hurricane strength with wind strengths of 115 miles per hour by Wednesday. Its trajectory as of midday Tuesday threatens the Florida Panhandle, which forecasters say could be hit on Thursday. Meteorologists say this system will be particularly big, with a wide wind field. They expect the storm to move fast, meaning a huge inland swath will endure the brunt of the storm and its predicted storm surge or abnormal rise of water. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced the state is preparing for Helen, with thousands of linemen, search and rescue, and roadway clearing crews on the way. This hurricane season, which stretched from June through November, has been abnormally quiet, with the last such storm happening on August 12th. Matthew Rosencrans, the lead hurricane forecaster for the National Weather Service, told NPR earlier this month that the water in the Atlantic is warmer than usual, which helps storms develop into powerful forces. Rosecrans and other forecasters expect more storms could form in the coming weeks. Going once, going twice. Alex Jones, Cameras, Mike's InfoWars show, vitamin site. Conspiracy theorist and InfoWars host Alex Jones owes some $1.5 billion in damage to Sandy Hook families for his lies that the 2012 shooting never happened. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones' InfoWars show is likely to be shut down within a few months, after a federal bankruptcy judge ruled Tuesday that plans to sell off the assets of Jones' media company, Free Speech Systems, can move forward. Net proceeds from any sale will go to Sandy Hook families, who won some $1.5 billion in damages from Jones for spreading lies that the 2012 school shooting never happened. Some of Jones's followers harassed and threatened the families for years. Attorneys for a group of the families called Tuesday's decision a significant step forward towards a fair and equitable resolution for all the families. FSS will now be sold at auction, meaning Alex Jones will no longer own or control the company he built, said attorney Chris Mattei. This brings the families closer to the goal of holding him accountable for the harm he has caused. A court-appointed trustee for Jones' personal bankruptcy case has already begun the process of auctioning off the components of Free Speech Systems, the parent company of InfoWars. Listed for sale is everything from production equipment to domain names and the InfoWars vitamin and supplement online store. The bankruptcy trustee, Christopher Murray, said in court that several parties have already expressed interest in buying FSS assets, including specifically Jones' X.com account. The sale process starts with sealed bids, and then open auctions are set for November 13th and December 10th if needed. The bidders are unknown and could be anyone from another vitamin and supplement seller to an entity trying to catch and kill the InfoWars brand, or one that wants it to live on. The fact that there's been interest in Jones' intellectual property assets, including social media accounts, might mean the latter is more likely. What that suggests to me is that the highest monetary bidders are going to be entities who want to take this brand and run with it in some way, says the University of Florida bankruptcy law professor Chris Hampson. That would mean someone in the right-wing ecosystem that would have a ready-made audience for them. Legally, Jones would be free to continue working for a new entity, but talks are continuing between Jones's team and some of the Sandy Hook families seeking a deal that would bar Jones from continuing to speak about the school shooting. A U.S. Justice Department lawyer, acting as a kind of bankruptcy watchdog, had tried to stop the sale, arguing that the bankruptcy trustee appointed in Jones' personal Chapter 7 bankruptcy has no authority to sell off FSS's individual assets, since Jones's company is no longer in bankruptcy and the company's assets are not property of the Jones estate. But U.S. bankruptcy judge Christopher Lopez rejected those arguments Tuesday, saying he would clarify his order so the sale can go ahead as planned. But as Hampson puts it, the court has saved some big fights for later. That includes the fight over Jones's real Alex Jones's X.com account. Jones's attorney argues that the exclusive property of Jones's natural person and cannot be sold. Doing so, they argue, would violate their client's right to publicity, his privacy rights, and would amount to involuntary servitude under the 13th Amendment. Meanwhile, the Sandy Hook families remain divided about how any proceeds should be distributed, but no matter how they slice it, court filings suggest the total payout will be under $8 million, a mere fraction of the $1.5 billion they are owed. A pygmy hippo is stealing hearts and biting zookeepers. Moo Dang, whose name translates to bouncy pork, has united the internet while following a familiar path to stardom. Defiant, sassy, slippery, chubby, loves to scream. We can all relate. If you have yet to come across the internet's favorite pygmy hippopotamus, then meet Moo Dang. She's a bit of a diva. The hottest new it girl on the planet, Hoda Kotb, a co-anchor on the Today Show, said during a recent episode. She's redefining beauty standards. She's got chubby pink cheeks and a distinct potato shape. Since Moo Dang's public introduction by the Khao Kiao Open Zoo in Chonburi, Thailand, south of Bangkok, on July 25th, when she was 2 weeks old, her star has only risen. Her name, which translates to bouncy pork, was chosen by a poll held on the zoo's Facebook page. Around 20,000 people voted. There were 3 options: Moo Dang, Moo Sap, minced pork, and Moo Dang, red pork. Moo Dang was won easily. Anthapon Nandi, Moo Dang's keeper at the zoo, began sharing content about the pygmy hippo on social media immediately. I think I'm closer to the point where I can share lovely day-to-day activities, he said in an email. Most people like that, and watching her grow up. But it was Yami Saccharino, a kermamacist and content creator born in Bangkok, who was at least partially responsible for the hippo's initial international fame. When he saw the zoo's Facebook poll, he felt compelled to translate it into English so that a broader audience would find her. The winner clearly was Moo Dang, he said. I think that partially had something to do with me, because I was like, I'm voting for this name, so help me vote for this name. Interest outside the zoo has been huge ever since, with the young pygmy hippo being mentioned by companies, sports teams, public transit, buildings, an encyclopedia, and meme lovers all over the world. There's even a cryptocurrency that bears her likeness. The whole adventure has raised awareness for pygmy hippopotamuses, which are smaller and more land-loving than a common hippo. They are native to the swamps and forests of West Africa, and there are fewer than 3,000 of the animals in the wild. That being said, Moo Dang is not the only one to gain internet fame. Tony, a pygmy hippo at Zoo Berlin, has also had people talking this summer. But Mr. Saraceno believes Moo Dang has been able to stand out thanks to her cuteness and spunky personality. Moo Dang specifically, even in comparison to her siblings, is really bouncy and really feisty, he said. She has no teeth, but is adamant about biting her keeper. This is probably because Moo Dang is teething, according to Mr. Nandi, Moo Dang's keeper. There is hope among the staffs at the zoo involved that the starring role that Moo Dang and Tony have played could have a positive long-term effect for other pygmy hippos. With their childlike behavior, baby animals have the wonderful potential to draw even greater attention to endangered animal species, said Philine Hatchmeister, the deputy head of communications and marketing at Zoo Berlin, adding, "Animals help to build a bridge and are a good introduction to the complex interrelationships of nature." All the attention on Mudang has also, unfortunately, come with a few bumps. After tourists began throwing things at her enclosure in hopes of waking her up, the zoo had to limit viewing times at Mudang's enclosure to 10 to 15 minutes and enhance the road to accommodate the amount of traffic, said Narawit Cho-chi, the zoo's director. Recently, however, visitors have been respectful and have followed the zoo's instructions, members of the zoo staff said in an email. But Mudang seems to be handling the fame fine. "For the mental health, I build trust with Mudang by engaging in conversation," Mr. Nundy said, adding that he calls her by her name and makes physical contact with her. If this all sounds a little familiar, it may be because in 2017, another baby hippo took the internet by storm. In January of that year, the Cincinnati Zoo announced the premature arrival of Fiona, a common river hippopotamus, and proceeded to post photos daily at noon for the clamoring public. "We definitely didn't always know she'd be a star," said Jenna Wingate, the head keeper of the Africa department at the Cincinnati Zoo. "We figured it out pretty quickly." Just like Mudang, Fiona saw her popularity grow online, as did demand for zoo tickets and viewings. In response, the Cincinnati Zoo started hanging with hippos, an up-close and personal tour. "We equate it to people trying to get Taylor Swift tickets," Miss Wingate explained. "They log in on their iPad, their phone, and their computer." Zoo staff thought Fiona's popularity would wane as she grew out of her adolescent stage, but 7 years later, she's still generating lines of people waiting to see her and buy her branded merchandise, with the fame helping generate more than $1 million for the zoo, allowing it to assist in worldwide conservation efforts for hippos. The Khao Kiao Open Zoo hopes to do similar work, using their profits to give back to research and conservation efforts, both inside and outside of the zoo. But while Fiona may be the original hippo it girl, zoo staff says she was happy to share the spotlight. "Fiona loves everyone. She would love to see Mudang doing her thing," Miss Wingate said. "Pygmy hippos are much more endangered than common or Nile hippos, and I think if this sparks interest in one person to grow up to be a conservationist, and that makes a difference for them, that's incredible." So what's next for Mudang? She's staying just as sassy. Her behavior may change depending on mood, because now she's a superstar, Mr. Nundy said. The Khao Kiao Open Zoo said it was planning to trademark Mudang the hippo. The zoo released a line of clothing featuring the hippo's likeness, selling out almost immediately, and set up a 24-hour live stream. Mr. Saraceno doesn't see an end in sight, especially in Thailand. He plans to visit Mudang in the coming months. "I don't think it's reached its peak yet," he said of the hippo's popularity. "She's ours. We love her." Zelensky addresses the Security Council, calling for attention to stay on Ukraine. "Russia can only be forced into peace. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine urged the council members to sustain their backing for his country's resistance to Russia's full-scale invasion. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine told the United Nations Security Council on Tuesday that Russia can only be forced into peace, and urged that the Russia-Ukraine war not be overlooked as the world turns its attention to wars in Gaza, Sudan, and Myanmar. "Russia is committing an international crime," Mr. Zelensky said in short but impassioned speech. "This war can't simply fade away. This war can't be calmed by talks. Actions are needed. Russia can only be forced into peace." Mr. Zelensky also told the Council's 15 members that Ukraine had obtained information that Russia was planning to attack its 3 nuclear plants. "We have proof of this. If Russia is ready to go that far, it means nothing you value matters to Moscow," he said. Mr. Zelensky said he had put together a new victory plan in the almost 3-year-old war based on the principles and values of the UN Charter, but did not elaborate on its details, other than to say that he was organizing a peace conference. He added that he would invite all countries to the conference, including China, Russia's most powerful partner, and India, which has said it's a neutral player in the war, but is helping to sustain Russia's economy with large oil purchases. Mr. Zelensky was speaking ahead of meetings this week, during which he plans to present his victory plan to President Biden and other U.S. officials. So far, he has withheld details of the plan from the public. Mr. Zelensky has also called for the United States and other allies to permit Ukraine to use long-range missiles provided by the West to strike deep into Russia. Security General Antonio Guterres briefed the council, telling diplomats that it was past time to end the war in Ukraine, which has led to catastrophic civilian suffering and spillover consequences, such as a rise in grain and energy prices and the displacement of millions. He also laid out the UN's role in providing life-saving humanitarian aid to some 6.2 million people in Ukraine this year. He appealed to donors for more funding. With the bitter winter approaching, only half of the UN's response plan was funded, Mr. Guterres pointed out. The longer this tragic war continues, the greater risk of escalation and spillover, he said. Antony J. Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, said the Security Council must act to address North Korea and Iran sending weapons to Russia for its war. He repeated an assertion that he first made during a trip to Britain this month, that in exchange for Iran equipping the Russian military with armed drones and short-range ballistic missiles, Russia was sharing technology with Iran on nuclear issues, as well as space information. Mr. Blinken did not give more details. Russia was one of the several powerful nations that joined an agreement led by President Barack Obama to place limits on Iran's nuclear program. Mr. Blinken said the Security Council must also help Ukraine reach a just and lasting peace, which means any diplomatic settlement must allow Ukraine to retain its full sovereignty and territorial integrity, despite the intent of President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia to occupy and annex large parts of eastern Ukraine, in addition to Crimea. The Security Council has been deadlocked over the war in Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion. Russia, a permanent member of the Council with veto power, has blocked resolutions calling for an immediate withdrawal of its troops. Strange cellmates in a Brooklyn jail. Sean Combs and Sam Bankman-Fried. Freed. Mr. Combs is sleeping in the same dormitory-style room as Mr. Bankman-Fried, the crypto mogul who was convicted of fraud. Sean Combs is living in the same unit of a Brooklyn jail as Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto mogul convicted of fraud, sleeping in a dormitory-style room with a group of other defendants assigned to the same section, according to a person familiar with the living arrangements. Mr. Combs has been held in jail, the Metropolitan Detention Center, for nearly a week since federal prosecutors unsealed an indictment charging him with racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking in what the government has called a decades-long pattern of physical and sexual violence. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his lawyers argued strenuously for him to be released on bail, proposing to a judge that he put up a $50 million bond and hire a security team to monitor him at all hours. The judge rejected the proposal, saying that he had concerns about Mr. Combs attempting to witness tamper, landing him in a special housing unit that often holds high-profile inmates. A spokeswoman for the Bureau of Prisons said the agency does not provide information about conditions of confinement, including housing assignments or internal security practices for any particularly incarcerated individual. Mr. Bankman-Fried has been housed in the jail known as MDC since last year, when his bail was revoked after a judge ruled that he had violated conditions of his release. In the lead-up to his trial, his lawyers complained that he had only intermittent internet access and could not adequately prepare for his case. They said that Mr. Bankman-Fried was a vegan, was subsisting on a diet of water, bread, and peanut butter. Mr. Bankman-Fried, who founded the FTX cryptocurrency exchange, was convicted of masterminding a sweeping fraud in which he siphoned billions of dollars to his customers' money into venture capital investments, political contributions, and other lavish spending. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. But after his conviction, Mr. Bankman-Fried asked to remain at MDC while he pursued an appeal. He has overlapped in the unit with other profile inmates, including an ex-president of Honduras and Mexico's former Secretary of Public Security. Mr. Combs' lawyers initially argued that the conditions of MDC were too horrific for a defendant waiting trial. The jail, a hulking concrete structure with about 1,200 inmates, has had a long history of complaints. A lawyer for detainee, who died there in July from injuries sustained in a fight, called the prison an overcrowded, understaffed, and neglected federal jail that is hell on earth. In 2019, an electric fire left some prisoners without heat in the dead of winter. But on Tuesday, a lawyer for Mr. Combs, Mark Agnifilo, who declined to comment on his client's roommates, spoke much more positively about the detention center, saying that the dedicated professionals at the MDC are doing everything possible to help him and his lawyers prepare his defense, and I personally thank them. He is strong, focused, and our meetings are very productive, Mr. Agnifilo said in a statement. I can't say enough good things about the MDC, which has been responsive to our and his needs. Mr. Combs' defense is pushing for a speedy trial. Mr. Agnifilo said his team was arranging for Mr. Combs to be able to assess the discovery provided by the government while incarcerated as soon as humanly possible. The government has said the case involved a massive amount of evidence, including many witnesses, photos, videos, and text messages. My view is, if the government wants to arrest him and hold him in jail, despite a massive bail package and despite his repeated offers to turn himself in, we are all going to have to move this along with unprecedented urgency, Mr. Agnifilo said. In a letter to the judge overseeing the case, Mr. Combs' lawyers wrote on Monday that they did not, at that point, intend to ask for Mr. Combs to be moved to a different detention center. The Bureau of Prisons has said that in recent months it has made an effort to improve conditions there, including hiring more permanent staff and addressing more than the 700 backlogged maintenance requests. That is all that we have today. Thank you for listening.